Good to be chatting again with Fraser Ellis, the independent MP for Narungga. How are you, Fraser?
Going well, thank you, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. Look, we caught up with some of your commentary in the Parliament recently as Parliament has resumed after the state election, and you've raised the issue of rural health and the need not only for doctors, but also you've been talking about getting some more funding for Ardrossan Hospital. Some success on that front?
The Ardrossan Hospital, yes. We over the course of the previous government, we secured 4 years of funding to help run the A&E there. As a community-owned hospital, if an uninsured patient presents, then they're less significantly out of pocket for providing emergency services. So we're able to secure 4 years of funding there, and thankfully the new government has rolled that over for 1 further year, during which time they'll conduct a bit of an inquiry or investigation, I guess, into what might be a sustainable model going forward for community hospitals. What's
the community saying to you about what the model should be for the Ardrossan Hospital, at least?
The hospital themselves are saying that they're in quite desperate need of financial assistance to run that A&E department. The cost of providing health services, they're a not-for-profit, but the cost of providing health services to recover those costs is becoming a significant impost on them. So we will see. And I note that the new government has committed significant funds to the Keith Community Hospital for a very similar thing. So hopefully that Keith precedent is looked upon in the course of the investigation into what a sustainable model at Ardrossan might be, and it's funded similarly.
Well, looking at this issue, you've put a motion to the Parliament about the shortage of rural doctors. Just tell us a bit about why you've put that motion forward.
Well, unfortunately, motions in and of themselves aren't binding upon anyone, but I just thought it was really important to keep the discussion going. It's far and away the biggest issue that we had during the most recent election campaign, and to ensure that issue stayed in front and centre and made sure that people kept talking about it. It was really pleasing to see, Ricky, that there was a long procession of speakers get up and decry the evils of the difficulties in regional healthcare and implore us to do better and whatnot. But we now need to see some actual action arise out of that. So everyone got up and said we need to do more, but now we need to look to see what they actually do.
Yeah, and that's the critical thing here. That's why I was keen to talk to you about this one, about rural doctors. There's a lot of talk, a lot of acknowledgement that there is a problem. We've seen outside of your electorate, for instance, of Woodner, this issue of now they've got a doctor 3 days a fortnight coming in, but it's just not enough. How do we actually get some movement towards some solutions on this front?
Well, I've got my idea, and that is that we need to get the stick out. I reckon there's plenty of carrots on the table, Ricky, to try and incentivise doctors out in the regional SA, and not a great deal, many of them seem to be working for the most part, so maybe it's time to force them out here and just limit the Medicare provider numbers so that there's a discerning allocation of doctors all around the state rather than a heavy dose of them in Burnside and not much anywhere else. So
it's and that's a point that Rowan Ramsey, the member for Grey, has been raising. I think he overlaps your peninsula, doesn't he, the electorate of Grey? Yep. He's been saying there needs to be a use of postcodes in effect to say, well, your Medicare provider number is tied to a particular regional locality. You have to go there. Is that the kind of stick you're talking about?
Well, something like that. I mean, I think it's clear to us in the country that incentives aren't working, and we need to start to compel doctors to serve the entire state. And we accept that to be the case for people like police officers and teachers and other public interest professions. So why not the same for doctors? They're still funded majority from the public purse through Medicare or something like that. So why can't we do the same thing for them?
To what extent is it important, though, that if a doctor's attracted to a regional community, that you have some sort of relief for them? It does seem in smaller communities that they're almost on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Does the government need to make sure there's more than one doctor allocated to a particular location so that the burden can be shared?
Presumably, it'll be a horses for courses thing to make sure that the community is served appropriately, but I'd note that decreasingly, and this is not a criticism directed at local doctors, but increasingly those local regional doctors aren't on call 24/7. They're withdrawing their on-call services to the local hospital because the workload that's been imposed upon them for quite some time. So increasingly around the state, we're finding ourselves relying on a locum service, which is distorting the market for local doctors and trying to attract people on a permanent basis. So when you can get $2 or $3 grand a day to work in a hospital on call for 12 hours, then it's going to be difficult to attract them to work as a GP and do the on-call work at the doctor for a normal rate. So.
And part of the challenge does appear to be the infrastructure that's available, the hospitals and the emergency departments that are there, and upgrading those or making them fit for purpose. You've mentioned in that motion that you shared on social media, there was some drafting there where you mentioned a potential for let's call it a dedicated department covering regional health. You still stand by that? Is that your own sort of drafting, something you thought was worth putting up the flagpole?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd put it up there. I just think that the issues that we face in regional SA with regards to health are distinct from the issues that are faced in metropolitan South Australia. there are some similarities and there are some that are the same, but I think there are quite a number of really distinct issues that require specialist thought that could be well served by having and I don't think there needs to be any more bureaucrats, but if we could separate the Department of Health into two parts, or one main part and a sub committee or part, then I think that would be beneficial. The other thing that I think would help practically is that the Minister for Health has such an extraordinarily large job that it's very difficult for him or her to be on top of everything. If we had a Minister for Regional Health that was at the Cabinet table banging their fist on it, going to bat for regional hospitals, then I think that could only be a good thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposal, the department side of it at least, but also the Shadow Minister for Regional Health, or the actual Minister for Regional Health, because you've got an ally in a sense in another independent in New South Wales, Dr. Joe McGirr, who's actually a surgeon practicing in Wagga Wagga, has made exactly the same proposal about having a dedicated department for the very same reasons you mentioned. He says, well, Sydney-centric mentality when it comes to hospital policy and health policy sees regional New South Wales miss out. That's kind of what you're getting at here as well.
Yeah, I think as I said, there are some similarities, but I think we face some rather distinct issues in regional South Australia with regard to health, and having a specialised department or part of a department and a minister at the cabinet table would only be a good thing. And I don't know, and I'm certainly not trying to claim credit for it, but as a matter of coincidence, the now opposition Liberal Party in South Australia have got a shadow minister for regional health, which is a step in the right direction, I think. Yeah, I think
we've spoken to Penny Pratt recently, holding that portfolio in a little while. But when it comes to the motion, I mean, really what I want to get at is what can be done. We could talk about it. We could have the opposition, who generally have the regional seats, and yourself on the crossbench, but you're not in government. How do we actually get some movement on this? Or do we just go through another 3 or 4 years of talking about the shortage of doctors and hoping another government will change position?
Well, look, I haven't got the resources as an independent member of Parliament to do the work required to come up with a solution. But for my part, I'm going to continue to bang the table and make as much noise as I can to ensure that the issue stays at the front and centre of policy debate, and make sure that it gets its due attention, and hopefully continue to put pressure on the government to actually come up with a solution. They have, credit to them, they have invested in regional health as a matter of their election commitments, and there's some wonderful things to come out of that infrastructure-wise, and perhaps the actual solution needs to come from the federal government with regard to Medicare, but it's important, I think, to keep the issue at the forefront of the minds of those that can change it, and I'll continue to bang the table on behalf of our community.
Oh, as will we on the air as well. We've been raising these issues with some of our ministers and shadow ministers. So, Fraser, thanks for raising it again, and we'll check in with you again soon.
Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate your time.